This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast here on a Thursday, June 4th of 2020. We are getting there almost halfway through the year, but it's taken a long time, but we are almost halfway through the year, and here's a nice weather update. It was 90 degrees yesterday, so the not hot and humid weather is kind of going away now. We're kind of heading towards, the regular southeastern summer. Just thought you guys would like that update. So that's great. So we have another interesting show for you guys today. It's more of the same pretty much. It's just a bunch of updates on different leagues. And how they are, coming back. We'll talk about the Drew Brees. We'll talk about Drew Brees in a little bit. That's the main story that we're going to talk about, up next. So other stuff we're going to talk about, the NBA's proposal. The NBA has a finalized restart plan that just needs to be approved. Then we'll talk about the MLB. We'll talk about the MLB update. Then after the MLB update, we'll talk about baseball without the minor leagues. The article I saw. Then we'll talk about the MLS coming back. The MLS figured stuff out. And the MLS figured stuff out. So they are now on track to come back there. So good for them. And then we'll do our draft review of the New York Jets. So, kind of more of the same show, pretty much. Not that much has happened sports-wise. A lot of stuff has happened in stuff that's outside of sports, which is the Black Lives Matter movement and civil rights just in general. So let's just get right into it. So Drew Brees is getting a lot of backlash right now because of the comments that he made. And I just want to preface this. His comments weren't necessarily bad. They just weren't right for the situation. That's pretty much what happened. Let me see if I can find his comments specifically, real quick. But he's been getting a lot of backlash for it. So basically, what he said was that he had basically what Drew Brees said. He said that he had grandparents that fought in World War II, grandparents that were veterans, stuff like that, and that he was asked about Colin Kaepernick and kneeling in the NFL and what he thinks about players kneeling again when the NFL season starts. And Drew Brees said, "I will never agree with anyone disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country." Now, this is of course not a necessarily bad take to have, just overall. But in this instance, this is a terrible take to have, because you have all these protests around the country. You have all these people that are protesting this certain police brutality and all this, and that was the main reason why Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for the flag, kneeling during the national anthem, was to protest police brutality and protest this racial inequality that we have in this country. Drew Brees, I guess he thinks it was all about disrespecting the flag or disrespecting the country, which I don't fully understand. I've never understood this. Even 4 years ago, I never understood this. I don't understand how I mean, I can see how people can take it as disrespect, but in my opinion, you could do a lot worse things than just kneeling during the national anthem. Like, I mean, especially in sports, I mean, I can attest to this. I go to enough sporting events where I hear the national anthem I've heard the national anthem way more than the average person in my lifetime. If you go to even like a decent amount of sporting events every year, you hear that national anthem all the time. So, I mean, I don't know, but he's on kind of the wrong thing here, the wrong thing on that. So he attracted backlash Wednesday across the sports world, including from a teammate when he reiterated his stance that he will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag during an interview with Yahoo Finance. So emotional Malcolm Jenkins, in a video that has since been deleted from social media, said that he was hurt by Brees' comment. And the comments were extremely self-centered. So the Yahoo interview featured Brees' first comments in the wake of George Floyd's death last week. So our communities are under siege, says Jenkins, and we need help. And what you're telling us is don't ask for help that way, ask for it a different way. I can't listen to it when you ask that way. We're done asking. Drew, and people who share your sentiments, who express those and push them around the world, the airwaves are the problem. And it's unfortunate because I considered you a friend. I looked up to you. You're somebody who I had a great deal of respect for, but sometimes you should shut the F up. Now, the shut the F up thing, I saw plenty of people bashing literally anyone who doesn't speak up on this. I saw a bunch of people on Twitter bashing Dabo Swinney for not speaking up on it. And then once he finally released a statement, which he didn't release a pre-written statement on social media that a lot of these coaches did. He released a 7-minute long video of him actually talking. And yes, I'll admit it, it was a whole bunch of nothing. But he did release a statement, and then everybody wasn't happy with that statement. Even though he wasn't necessarily against it, but he wasn't necessarily for it. So, I mean, everybody got angry at him for releasing that. But, so shutting the F up is not the way to go in this scenario, because it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So Jenkins is safe to agree to a 4-year deal with the Saints in March, later clarified his decision to take down the initial video. He said, I recorded a few videos when thinking about how to respond to Drew Brees. I don't take any of it back. I meant what I said. I removed the first video because I knew it be more about the headlines. I want people to understand how those of us struggling with what's going on feel. So Jenkins, who appeared on CNN on Wednesday, was not alone in sharing his thoughts. Brees' remarks on the flag drew a sharp rebuke on social media from Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, San Francisco 49ers quarterback Richard Sherman, and a bunch of other NFL players, including LeBron James, who's not an NFL player, but the NBA player LeBron James. So Rodgers also posted on his Instagram with a photo of himself and his teammates locking arms during the national anthem, writing, a few years ago we were criticized for locking arms in solidarity before a game. It has never been about the anthem or the flag. Not then, not now. Listen with an open heart. Let's educate ourselves and then turn the world and thought into action. So that's what Aaron Rodgers said. Then Richard Sherman took to Twitter on Wednesday afternoon saying that Brees is beyond lost. I guarantee you there were black men fighting alongside your grandfather, but that doesn't seem to be about that. Sherman wrote that uncomfortable conversation you are trying to avoid by injecting military into a conversation about brutality and equality is part of the problem. Then you have Steven Jackson, who is a close friend of George Floyd, who has become a vocal leader for the black community in the days since Floyd's death, blasted Brees in a video posted to Instagram saying it was bad timing, Drew Brees, bad timing, bruh. All right, you play for New Orleans, you live in New Orleans, all of them black people support you, Drew Brees. You got to be a little bit more sensitive to the timing. Jackson also applauded Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas, who appeared to take a shot at his quarterback on Twitter. Y'all got to check y'all teammates. Michael Thomas, I salute you, bruh. F Drew Brees, way to check his ass, stuff like that. Drew Brees gave a response saying, I love and respect my teammates. I stand right there with them in regard to fighting for racial equality and justice. I also stand with my grandfathers who risked their lives for this country and countless other military men and women who do it on a daily basis. And there's more backlash. I think the biggest way I know Drew Brees screwed up, there were people in New Orleans chanting F Drew Brees. That's how you know you screwed up. That's how you know. That's just how you know. Anyways, when we return, we'll talk about the NBA's proposal to restart. Their official proposal when we come back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, in light of everything that's going on, the NBA has got stuff done. The NBA finally has an official proposal that they are sending over to the Board of Governors. They're planning to propose it to the Board of Governors on Thursday, and then after it gets through the Board of Governors, I think the Players Association will have to, the Player Union will have to agree upon it. But it is looking good. The NBA might be back. But what does that entail? What does the NBA coming back officially mean? Well, we have a news article to talk about. The NBA is planning to propose a 22-team comeback, a 22-team return to the 2019-20 season in a Board of Governors meeting on Thursday, sources told The Athletic. With the draft lottery expected to be in August, there are plans to conduct an NBA draft combine, though an exact date remains to be determined. The NBA's proposal will be based on feedback, collaborative discussions, and input from constituents around the league. So this 22-team format will be at Orlando's Disney World. It would bring the 16 teams currently in a playoff spot, 6 additional teams, and include a play-in tournament for the 8th seed, sources said. So they were officially doing the playoff tournament, play-in tournament idea. That's why they're bringing some of these extra teams in. Depending on who you ask, they might be bringing some of these extra teams in just to, get Zion Williamson in, especially once I tell you what teams are going to be included in the format. But, so according to sources, the 9th seed is more than 4 games behind the 8th seed. The 8th seed earns the playoff spot, but if the 9th seed is 4 or fewer games behind, then the 8th and 9th seed will enter a play-in tournament that is double elimination for the 8th seed and single elimination for the 9th. So ESPN first reported the league was working on a 22-team model. So Adam Silver informed the Board of Governors on Friday that the league is targeting a June 31st resumption of the season. The NBA discussed 4 different competition scenarios with owners, 16 teams advancing directly to the playoffs, 20 teams with stage, Olympic group style play. These are all different scenarios that happen. 22 teams with games for seeding and a play-in tournament, or 30 games with 72 regular season games and a play-in tournament. However, 16 and 30 team formats lost traction recently. The 16-team format would not provide teams currently out of the playoffs the opportunity to make a postseason bid, nor accomplish the financial upside of the other formats. The 30-team model, meanwhile, brings several bottom-feeding teams that do not belong in the bubble environment, given the NBA's medical safety and health priority. Hornets owner Michael Jordan was outspoken on Friday's call, advocating for player safety and not having players have to return for meaningless games following a 4+ month hiatus. Hawks and Bulls ownership group said on the call that they wanted to return, but several players and staffers throughout both organizations prefer not to. Among several other medical protocols expected to be proposed in the coming days, according to sources, you have players unable to shower in the arena would need to do so in their respective hotels. Bench players would sit in spread out rows. Inactive players would sit in the stands, and no guests until the playoffs. So, first off, it makes no sense to bring teams that have no chance in the playoffs into this. I've always had that stance. It makes no sense. Because if they have no chance at making the playoffs, then why should they be in it? Like, it makes no sense to include like these random teams that you know don't deserve to be there in the first place. Not to risk their health or risk anything. But anyways, here are the teams that are going to be there. Of course, you have the playoff teams of the Milwaukee. We'll start with the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference is bringing 9, and the Western Conference is bringing 13. Now, there's a good reason for this, and I'll discuss it after I mention the team. So you have the Milwaukee Bucks, the Toronto Raptors, Boston Celtics, Miami Heat, the Pacers, 76ers, Nets, Magic, and then the extra team being brought along for the Eastern Conference is the Washington Wizards. Then you have on the Western Conference, you have the Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, Jazz, Thunder, Rockets, Mavericks, Grizzlies, and then the extra teams, you have the Blazers, Pelicans, Kings, Spurs, and Suns. Now you might be wondering, why is the Western Conference bringing more teams than the Eastern Conference? Shouldn't it be even? Well, the main reason for that is the Eastern Conference has such a huge drop-off from 8 to 9 that it just doesn't seem likely that other teams in the Eastern Conference would have a chance. So, for instance, the Magic, they're 30-25. The Wizards are 24-40. The Wizards are the Wizards are 5.5 games back from the Magic. So they're still kind of in that threshold where they play if they play some of these play-in games, then they still have a chance at making the playoffs. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Conference, you have the Memphis Grizzlies, and 3.5 games behind them are the Blazers and the Pelicans and the Kings, and then 4 games behind them is the Spurs, and then 6 games behind them is the Phoenix Suns. So the Western Conference has a lot more challenge there, and a lot more teams that have a chance at making the playoffs, and that's why they're getting more teams. Is this scenario good though? That's yet to be seen. At this point, people just care about having sports. It's just the playoffs. None of these lower teams, like I don't think the Wizards are going to make a run. I don't think the Portland Blazers or the Kings or the Pelicans or the Spurs or the Suns are all going to be able to make a run. The Pelicans will be interesting to watch just because of Zion. Of course, I think everyone knew that the Pelicans were going to get invited no matter what because the league wants Zion to play there. But they would play 8 more regular season games. So some of these teams will have a chance to make the playoffs there. So it's still possible that teams outside of a playoff spot could jump into the mix. But it still seems pretty unlikely. I think the only team that probably has a good chance would be the Grizzlies, as they are. I mean, not the Grizzlies, the Blazers or the Pelicans or the Kings, as they are very close. You can't really say because that race for the final spot in the Western Conference specifically, it's going to be crazy because, once again, these guys are coming off, about almost 4 months, 3.5 months without playing a meaningful basketball game. So it's going to look weird. It's going to look weird. It depends on if they are healthy, if they're conditioned, and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. But it's looking interesting there. But there are still, Michael Jordan, of course, has issues with this 22-team plan. What if someone brings COVID-19 into the expanded bubble and the season has to get shut down again? The NBA should try to get the playoffs as quickly as possible because that's where the real money is. Moreover, the league has played more than enough games to determine a 16-team playoff field. But the main reason they are doing this, in my opinion, is to get more eyes on Zion, get more games in for the money, for the TV money. Is that 8 extra games going to actually matter in the long scheme of things? Probably not, but it matters in people's pockets. So, sorry, Minnesota Timberwolves, Cleveland Cavaliers, Atlanta Hawks, Detroit Pistons, New York Knicks, Chicago Bulls, and Charlotte Hornets. You have all been eliminated from playoff contention, but the NBA is back. Y'all probably didn't have that much chance anyways. Just saying. But we are back. The NBA, well, we're not officially back. The owners still have to vote for it, and then I think the player union have to vote for it as well. But we are as close to getting back as we possibly can at this moment in time. And one of the unfortunate side effects of this is that Vince Carter's career is officially over. He took his final shot on the last day before the league shut down. So sorry, Vince Carter. I don't know, but NBA's coming back, guys. We're getting closer and closer to having sports again, and I, for one, am excited about that. When we come back, though, we have to talk about another league that is not doing great with the whole coming back to sports thing as we talk about MLB again when we come back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, Major League Baseball. Where the NBA, the NHL, and even the MLS, we'll talk about the MLS later in the show, have all figured stuff out. The NFL has pretty much figured stuff out. Once again, the NFL doesn't really have to do that much work because they haven't started their season yet. But all of these leagues have figured stuff out. Meanwhile, baseball, who is taking possibly the biggest L in this whole COVID-19 mess, in this whole pandemic, they are taking the biggest L known to man in this whole COVID-19 pandemic, because Major League Baseball, so much stuff has happened. You have more chaos among more dissonance between players and owners. You got more minor league teams are getting cut and slashed. Players are getting cut salaries. The big story coming into the baseball season before COVID-19 was the minor league system, because the minor league system was huge. The minor league system is huge, and the MLB wanted to cut down on minor league teams, and thanks to COVID-19, they can do that without much backlash now because of either lack of funding or just because they just wanted to, and that's what I really hate about this whole thing, because the MLB, you can definitely tell that the MLB is using this as a way to cut minor league teams. But we'll talk about that on the next segment, because we're going to talk about minor league teams specifically. We're talking about we're talking about proposals, and we're talking about how the season could be. So Major League Baseball on Wednesday rejected the Player Association's proposal of a 114 game season and told the union it would not send a counter, again leaving the parties deadlocked in their quest to begin the 2020 season. The league also informed the MLBPA it has started talks with its owners about playing a shorter season without fans, that it is ready to discuss additional ideas with the union on that subject. So the impasse over player pay, however, shows no sign of abating. The league will not make another proposal. The union, after agreeing to prorated salaries in March, remains steadfast that its members will not accept a second pay cut and does not plan to negotiate against itself. So the MLB is entertaining playing a season as short as 50 games. A scenario exists in which players could earn more total dollars playing 80 or so games at a per game discount than 50 or so at full price. The league has not proposed such a scenario. The idea for now is hypothetical. But the math for this year's pay is not the only factor for players. The union wants MLB to honor the terms outlined by the March agreement and might be willing to sacrifice short-term financial gain in order to establish what it believes to be a long-term negotiating strength. Last week, the PA rejected the owner's proposal of a tiered salary structure that would have resulted, by the union's estimate, in an additional reduction in total dollars of more than 30%. So if the parties are to reach a new deal, they will need to act quickly to play a season as long as 82 games, starting around July 4th. While no hard deadline exists for a deal, the players likely will need a minimum of a month to report to camps and participate in preseason workouts before the season begins. So, as we've discussed before, time is running out for Major League Baseball. Time is running out for this 82-game season, and I think a 50-game season would be absurd. That's just not a big enough sample size. I mean, that's just not how baseball works. I don't think baseball's ever had a 50-game season. Not even in the 1880s. So, well, no hard deadline exists for a deal, the players likely will need a minimum of a month to report to camps, like we said. So, I mean, it's coming up. Through the language in the March agreement between the parties is subject to interpretation. MLB believes the wording enables Commissioner Rob Manfred to determine the length of the season as long as the league pays the players the prorated salaries outlined by the deal. The union, though, is not without leverage. The March agreement does not appear to give Manfred the power to dictate the postseason, saying the parties shall negotiate in good faith regarding potential one-time changes to the structure, format, qualification rules, and other similar rules regarding the 2020 postseason, which discussions shall include potential ways to expand the postseason beyond its current format. So the union offered expanded playoffs in its proposal to the owners on Sunday, but only as part of a larger agreement. The failure to strike a deal would leave the league without the ability to expand the postseason and realize additional income. The league also would sacrifice other potential benefits the union offered, including player commitments to broadcast enhancements. Either or both parties could pursue a grievance if they cannot resolve their differences. The ensuing arbitration, however, would be time-consuming and thus is an impractical solution if the parties wish to play an abbreviated 2020 season. The owners do not see an extension of the regular season as viable. The March agreement allows for such a plan, but Diamondbacks owner Ken Kendrick told Arizona Sports 98.7 FM on Tuesday that the union's proposed 114-game season was not acceptable because of the possibility of a second wave of COVID-19 hitting this fall. The threat of the virus derailing the season will linger even if the major league players and owners agree on economics and health and safety protocols for 2020. So two players in Japan's Yomiuri Giants recently tested positive for COVID-19, forcing the team to cancel a practice game against the Shibu Lions and renewing concerns about the game's ability to return to that country. We don't want to take the risk of putting our players in jeopardy and our game in peril as we'll be playing games beyond the end of October, so our model is and will never be changed, and that will not be playing baseball in the month of November. So financial considerations also might drive such a decision. Fox Sports and TBS, the networks that carry the bulk of postseason broadcasts, likely would want the league to stick to its current plan and stage the postseason in October. So pushing playoff games to November would cost the networks lucrative pre-election advertising. Fox, which carries the World Series, might sacrifice ad dollars if the series ended around Thanksgiving. The network's other programming at that time includes Michigan-Ohio State college football game on November 28th, as well as the NFL. So the MLB indicated this week it would pay players their full per-game salaries, but only a schedule that would consist of as few as 50 games. The league says it would lose money for every regular season game played. The union wants to play as many games as possible to maximize the players' earnings on a per-game basis. So the league has projected the players in 2020 to earn a total of about $4.37 billion. They would receive approximately 31% of that sum in a 50-game season with full prorated salaries, or about $1.35 billion. How then might they do better with a second pay cut over 82 games? If, for example, the owners proposed giving them 80% of their prorated salaries in a season of that length, the players would receive 40% of their overall salaries, or about $1.75 billion. In other words, roughly $400 million more than they would earn from 100% of their prorated salaries in a 50-game season. Again, the league has given no indication it would make such a proposal and might simply prefer to play a shorter season to pay a lesser amount. The union, meanwhile, does not want to entertain a second pay cut, believing that players for the games they work should be paid full. So, deadlocked, as we've discussed before. The union gave perhaps an early glimpse of its approach during the negotiations for the 2020 amateur draft. The league proposed a 10-round draft that would have reduced signing bonus rates by half in rounds 6 through 10, creating a cost of $500,000 per club in those rounds. The union did not accept that offer or negotiate off it because the league's proposal included other restrictions the union found unacceptable, including a limit on the number of undrafted players who could sign for $20,000 this year. So no new proposal followed, and the league exercised its right under the March agreement to reduce the draft to 5 rounds from its customary 40. So the stakes of the 2020 Major League season obviously are much higher, yet for all the recent tension between the parties, Manfred's history is that he prefers to settle with the union rather than simply impose his will on the players. He declined to exercise his unilateral right to impose a pitch clock, for example. So the path to resolution, though, remains unclear, and time is working against the players and owners if they wish to play 82 games. The parties also need to negotiate a host of lesser details, including roster sizes, rule changes, and payment and service time for players who wish to opt out of the season, whether they are at risk for COVID-19 or not. So the league fears a second wave of the virus might force the cancellation of the postseason and cost the owners additional millions of dollars. The union offered to defer $100 million if that worst-case scenario occurred, and might negotiate a higher amount if the league offered to maintain the players' full prorated salaries in a season closer to 82 games than 50, but the league for now remains opposed to deferrals. The players' proposal for 114 games and owner's suggestion of 50 does offer one potential glimmer of compromise. The midpoint of those two numbers is, of course, 82, which is, I think, 82 is a fine number. I think it is. But there, just a bunch of squabble over money. That's basically all this is. And I can't blame the players for wanting their full pay. I can't blame the owners for trying to save money. Well, actually, I can blame the owners because they're rich. Like, what are you doing? You're billionaires. You can survive. They're going to up ticket prices next year anyways whenever fans are allowed back. So I don't really feel any sympathy towards the owners in this point in time. But when we come back, we'll discuss how baseball will coach players without the minor leagues or coaches in general when we come back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
I discussed it a little bit. Baseball, I feel like Rob Manfred has been trying to get rid of minor league baseball for the longest time, or at least some of the lower levels. And I do agree that minor league baseball does have a little bit too much. There is a little too much. You have the rookie league, you have low A, then you have high A, and then you have double A and triple A. Now, I can see how some people would think that low A, high A, rookie league, those shouldn't be there. But the reason they are there is because you can't just throw a high school kid into double A right away. You gotta kind of, unless they're Bryce Harper or Mike Trout or Steven Strasburg, you can't just throw them in to double A action, because double A is filled with guys who've been in the system for years, many, many years, and they're used to playing their roles. So throwing them in a rookie league, the rookie league is, of course, pretty much all rookies, and low A and high A are younger guys, of course, unless there's a rehabbing guy or just some guy who's at the tail end of his career. That's pretty much what low A and high A are for. And I like that, because it gives them a chance to grow against similar talent levels, and if they do phenomenal in that, then you move them up and stuff like that. The minor league system for baseball is huge, but it's not flawed. It's the most lucrative. These minor league teams, they mean a lot to the cities that they're in. Like these small cities that would never get a major league baseball team or a pro football team or anything like that. They take a lot of pride in their minor league team, even though they have there's new players to learn every single year. I mean, a lot of these cities take a lot of pride in these minor league teams. For instance, I live in Greenville, South Carolina. The Greenville Drive are our minor league team. They're the closest we have to any major sport. I mean, we have 2 minor league soccer teams. We have a minor league hockey team as well. But people really like the Greenville Drive. And because of the Greenville Drive, we have a bunch of Red Sox fans down here, because people go to a Drive game and they're like, oh man, the Red Sox, I like the Red Sox now. And then that's how that works. So, I mean, people here would be furious if the Drive left, because beautiful ballpark we have here. And if the Greenville Drive left, then people would, of course, be not happy about that. So my biggest issue with this pandemic is that some owners of some leagues are using it to enforce rules that they've been trying to enforce for the longest time, and they're just going to probably just make those stay just because they enforced it during a pandemic. Let's look at it as kind of an executive order from the president during war. Nobody's going to question it at the time because it's war or whatever. But then once war's over, is there going to be enough backlash to repeal it and roll it back? And that's kind of what Manfred's kind of banking on. He cut Major League Baseball cut a bunch of minor leaguers. Now, of course, it's not the league's decision. It's the smaller teams, but the owners and Rob Manfred work very close together, so it could be a coordinated thing. But Rob Manfred wanted to get rid of 40 minor league teams already, and now we're cutting minor league players. But because of this, what happens to player development? It may seem like a secondary question right now, especially with all the issues going on with the player union and the owners and stuff like that. But it does matter, even if there's no major league season, because at some point baseball will return to some sort of normalcy, and it will have mattered if the players receive quality advice in the interim. So in the face of near certitude that there will be no minor league season this year, teams are increasingly faced with the specter of a lost year of development for their best young players. Nearly 2/3 of the league's rosters are filled with players who have less than 3 years of experience, so there's never been more attention paid to making sure that the pipeline is producing players who are ready for the majors, making that potential lost time deeply worrisome for most front offices. That doesn't mean, of course, that every team is thinking about the immediate future of their minor leaguers in the same way. So in a key move that freed teams up to do what they felt was necessary to survive, Commissioner Rob Manfred suspended uniform employee and contracts. As a result, teams have been able to negotiate pay reductions and furlough employees in the marketing, ticketing, and stadium departments. Unfortunately, given the lack of fans and seats at any level, the work isn't there to be done. But that has also meant the same renegotiations with staff in the player development and scouting departments, which teams have approached differently as they think about possible outcomes for their youngest prospects. These staff affected by those varying team strategies are left with questions about what this all means for them now. How long will it be in limbo, and what will happen to their contracts and concessions when normalcy returns? How much player development is there even to be done with the amount of testing and added risk mitigation structure that the major leaguers are negotiating? It just doesn't seem like there will be minor leaguers this season. No source contacted for this story had any hope for minor league schedule. One even pointed out that teams probably won't be allowed to have young players in camp if they're not allowed on a 50-man roster. How can they be in camp if you're not testing them? Oh man, yawning, sorry. If you're not testing them for COVID-19 on the same level, but not trying to keep them virus-free in the same way. We have to do something, though, said one frustrated player development executive. We can't just lose a year. So in terms of on-site work with prospects, most teams won't have much. Sure, a team like the Mariners may have a few young prospects on their 50-man roster in order to have them continue to improve and work around major leaguers. But Jared Kelenic and Logan Gilbert the Athletics' Corey Brock put Jared Kelenic and Logan Gilbert on the most recent projected roster for that season, but at least one more competitive team is considered dedicating just a single roster spot to a prospect they hope will not play in the big leagues this year, the 50th man. For most teams, have replacements for injured major leaguers will be the focus. Whatever the active roster is, 26, 28, 30, there's also going to be a pool of players, said one executive. In that pool of players, you would potentially add prospects. Probably not too many, because if it hit the fan, they're going to have to go to the big leagues. But you could add in players there, and now you would have to staff that. You essentially would be bringing some personnel if they were furloughed and you needed them because of new circumstances. You would take them off furlough. That's an angle clubs would go for. So you hope we can work something out, and we have some kind of expanded instructional league and expanded fall league so you can get your top prospects playing. But most organizations have roughly 200 players in their system, and those guys aren't playing, and it's definitely a challenge because we need them to continue to get better. So even for teams that have aggressively furloughed their player development staff, there's a sense that those organizations are waiting for more details before they proceed, and that this isn't necessarily a 6-month furlough. It's more of a TBD, a to be determined. So once the details are set, there will be work for coaches. Systems have been set in place for telework so far during this health crisis, and so players and coaches have become more familiar with the types of interactions that will govern their development process going forward. Tracking systems, portable technology, and new software. But how many coaches do you really need to run that sort of process, wondered one executive. Kept upper-level coordinators that will help with the taxi squad. Could just 2 coordinators do it? There isn't the everyday work of a AAA hitting coach, and yet the relationship exists and can help the player get better if they can be more consistently available than just one coordinator. At the other end of the spectrum, you have the Angels and A's possibly hurting themselves with aggressive furloughing, since they won't even have the area scouts to go get the players and establish a conversation with players about signing. Even those teams are thinking they can bring back enough coaches to get the work done once there's a sense of how much work there will be. There's a second way that approach might not be ideal, though. So once the 5th round is completed, all amateurs can potentially sign anywhere for the same $20,000 bonus, and there will be a free-for-all for all that talent. One strong motivation for signees might be the competitiveness of the major league team, sure, but today's players are increasingly tech and data savvy and often know the makeup of a player development departments in different organizations. More than one team has prepared its player development video for the incoming 20Kers, and some coaches could be considered one-man recruiters this June. So this is an unprecedented opportunity for our team to add a huge infusion of talent, said one player development executive, by recruiting the $20,000 signees. Hopefully the owners recognize that and don't furlough the department. So nothing is obvious in this time, of course. Player development experts, more or less important right now. Do they have more or less work? Will they have more or less impact against the backdrop of a potential lost year? But there are also questions about what happens when things return to normal operations. So really, the story for coaches is the same as it is for all of us. Though it's seemingly impossible and the particulars are a problem, there's work to be done. Players still want to get better. Baseball will come back someday. Coaches will need to coach. Coaches need to coach, and somehow we'll figure out the how, when, where, and for how much. But right now, we are, of course, in this limbo. Major League Baseball has been in this limbo. But you know who's not in a limbo? Major League Soccer, which we'll discuss them figuring out a deal when we come back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Ladies and gentlemen, the MLS is back. We did it. The one league nobody was really talking about, the MLS, is back. They have approved a return to play, or at least the players approved a return to play plan. So the MLS is coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, the MLS Players Association voted on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning to approve the latest return to play plan negotiated with Major League Soccer. The MLSPA announced Wednesday morning that the vote passed and a new collective bargaining agreement had been ratified by the players and league owners. The vote means MLS will come out of its COVID-19 suspension with a summer tournament in the Orlando area. The league suspended its season due to the COVID-19 pandemic in March 12th. So, we have some more details on this real quick. The players in the league ratified a CBA that has several alterations from the one that was agreed in February. So Commissioner Don Garber said on a call with reporters that players will take a 5% pay cut for the remainder of the 2020 season. Team and individual bonuses in 2020 will be reduced to a $5 million pool, $1 million of which will go toward the Orlando tournament. All terms of the previously agreed CBA have been pushed back by 1 year, so increases for 2021 will now begin in 2022. In addition, the CBA was extended 1 year through the 2025 season. Players also agreed to take a reduction in the television revenue share that was previously agreed beginning in 2023. Players were initially set to receive 25% of the net increase in media revenue that exceeds $100 million above the 2022 levels inserted into salary, budget, and general allocation money. Instead, players will receive 12.5% in 2023 before returning to 25% in 2024 and 2025. So notably, the league and players agreed to add a force majeure clause into the CBA. The league removed language that would have tied the clause to specific attendance figures in the MLS markets. The agreement is modeled after the language in the NBA's CBA. That clause is now permanently in the MLS CBA. So good job, MLS, for getting stuff done. One new detail in the league's return to play plan: teams are able to stay in the market for a full team training, will be allowed to stay home until just before the start of the Orlando tournament in early July. Other teams will travel to Orlando in advance of the tournament in order to train before games. So sources would not share the details of the vote. However, every individual player voted, and a simple majority was needed to pass the agreement. So this comes after roughly 24 hours after threatening players with a lockout if they did not agree to its preferred terms. So MLS revised its plan to return to play in Orlando, setting the table for a full player vote on the proposal Tuesday afternoon. So multiple sources were optimistic that the plan will pass, which it did. So sources said the new proposal from MLS removed language from a force majeure clause that was tied specifically to attendance decreases in MLS markets. The players had already agreed to insert a force majeure clause, a provision that allows one or more parties to back out of agreed terms if circumstances arise that are beyond the parties' controls. So into the CBA as part of the return to play negotiations. Sources said that the new force majeure clause is essentially identical in substance to the clause that was agreed upon by the MLSPA over the weekend. So the league's proposal also included a decreased percentage of media rights revenue share for players in 2023. The first year the provision was set to kick in under the terms of the new CBA. The revenue share agreement dubbed incremental media revenue, IMR, was designed to insert a percentage of net increase in media revenue that exceeds $100 million above 2022 levels into salary, budget, and general allocation money. The players were supposed to receive 25% in 2023 and 2024. The league's latest proposal will drop that percentage to 12.5%. ESPN reported the league's previous offer asked players to take just 10% of that revenue share in 2023. Players then countered with an offer of 17% in 2023 and 25% in 2024. So the MLSPA bargaining committee held a call to discuss the league's amended plan on Tuesday morning. Full player pool held a call at 1 p.m. MLS has been suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic since March 12th. Like we mentioned before, the league and the players' union have been engaged in negotiations for several months about a return to play, with owners seeking to mitigate economic losses suffered in the pandemic and players looking for their own protections regarding a return to field. So the force majeure clause and the IMR were two major outstanding items in negotiations between the league and the players, according to sources. Other items, such as pay cuts, have already been agreed to. In the latest proposal, the league agreed to the players' proposal of 7.5% pay cut for the remainder of the season, according to a source. So previously, the league was seeking an 8.75% cut. So according to a statement issued by the MLSPA on Sunday, players also agreed to several alterations to new CBA, including delaying salary increases by 1 year, capping individual and team bonuses, and extending the agreement through 2025. So as it stands, the plan would see players return to fields in a made-for-TV tournament at Disney's ESPN Wide World of Sports complex outside of Orlando. So teams will fly to Florida on or around June 24th and train for 2 weeks before the start of the competition. The tournament will include 3 group stage games, which will count toward the regular season, as well as a knockout round. The exact specifics of the knockout round, format, prizes, etc., were not clear. Were not clear at the time. So according to a source, the league will create a $1 million prize pool and will help fund the philanthropic efforts in teams' home markets. In total, the tournament will keep teams in Orlando for around 6 weeks. The league's initial plan called for teams to be in Florida for the maximum of 10 weeks and play a minimum of 5 games. The agreement also allows for players to opt out of playing in a tournament if they're granted an exemption due to medical or family conditions. A source expected players with pregnant partners to be granted an exemption. Players without an exemption who do not participate in the tournament will face what one source described as a strict penalty. Throughout negotiation, plans called for every member of the MLS traveling party to effectively be locked down at the league hotel for the duration of the tournament. Family members of the traveling parties will not be allowed in the facility. The league was initially slated to house all members of the traveling party in the Disney-owned Coronado Springs Resort, but a source said that other properties were being vetted earlier this week, as the NBA, which also is looking to return in Orlando, would end up using Coronado Springs. So MLS got kicked out by the NBA pretty much. The hope is for the league to resume its regular season in home markets after the Orlando tournament, though that plan is, of course, dependent on the progress of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a situation where players are going to have to take less for what they want to do. They're going to take less money probably to return to play, but I just don't understand what is up with the MLB. I mean, I understand, like, all these other leagues, they're figuring out ways to do it, and the MLB just can't. And I understand that there's a huge, long-standing history of owners versus players in Major League Baseball. The owners have never been for the players have never been for the owners in baseball. It's just been such a wild ride in MLB, especially in the past 50 or so years when it comes to CBAs and player unions. I mean, we've had lockouts and stuff like that. But the MLS can figure this out. And I just don't understand why we can't figure this out. I just really can't. But the MLS is coming back, which is great for the MLS. This tournament sounds like an interesting idea, at least to start everything off. It's an interesting idea to start everything off, I guess. It counts toward group stage games, count towards the regular season, which is interesting to put in there, interesting clause to put in there. And then I mean, yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. I really don't have much to say about this. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm excited that MLS is coming back. I don't want anyone to... I don't want to make it sound like I don't care about the MLS coming back. I'm glad they are coming back. Very glad they are coming back. So, happy to get MLS back. But I just can't stop thinking about MLB. I can't stop thinking about MLB. It might be because we just talked about the MLB for 2 whole segments, but just they can't figure things out. All these other sports are figuring everything out, and baseball's already down on the totem pole in the American psyche right now. You have a bunch of people who say baseball's boring, a bunch of people who don't like baseball, a bunch of people such and such. Ratings are down for baseball, stuff like that, and then we have this. And we're just hurting the public image of the sport even more, and it just kills me. But when we come back, we'll talk about the draft review for the New York Jets when we return.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the NFL Draft. Of course, we're talking about the New York Jets this time around. We talked about the Cleveland Browns. Now we're talking about the New York Jets. It's just trash. Trash, bad. No, I'm joking. The Jets have made huge improvements over the past couple of years. Sam Darnold is looking to be a pretty decent quarterback, at least a pretty decent quarterback in the NFL. So, the Jets, they need to address some serious needs, though, while also making some surprise. They address some serious needs, and they're also making some surprising selections. Going into the draft, General Manager Joe Douglas needed to get some help for Sam Darnold, and I believe he did a decent job at doing so. So Douglas did a good job of accumulating draft picks by trading down twice on day 2 of the 2020 draft. His first trade left New York fans feeling nervous and antsy because of the level of talent at wide receiver position that was still on the board. However, he got a great value on Baylor wide receiver Denzel Mims, which we'll talk about him. And then he had a second trade at the end of day 2 when he traded his last of 3 third-round picks to the Patriots for 2 fourth-round picks and a 6th-round pick. So the Jets made 9 selections. They traded their 10th and final pick to the Colts for cornerback Quincy Wilson. New York needed some depth in their secondary. They definitely added to it this weekend. So let's start it off with Mekhi Becton, left tackle from Louisville. So after 3 days to really process, Becton, some Jets guys are positive and optimistic that they got the right guy. Some of them were initially upset when New York passed up Iowa tackle Tristan Wirfs, but the Jets needed a true left tackle, and Becton is more polished in that area than Wirfs. This pick is still a gamble, though, as there are questions whether he truly loves the game. Becton has potentially the best tackle in the 2020 draft, but he still needs a lot of work before you put him in the starting lineup. It won't look pretty the first time he plays a preseason game, especially with no OTAs and mini games to help him progress early. However, it is easy to get lost in Becton's tape when he's tossing 270-pound defensive ends like ragdolls. This pick should usher in a new team philosophy, smash mouth football. Becton may need some fine-tuning as a pass protector, but boy, is he a monster in the run game. Le'Veon Bell should be making a new song about his 6'7", 364-pound friend. So last season, Bell had a very tough return to the NFL, but anyone with eyes could tell you he was far from the problem. Adam Gase couldn't get him going with head-scratching and uncreative play designs. But let's not pile on the coach, as the offensive line was the number one issue there. The entire unit was missing practices and with injuries, which led to missed games, which then led to a lack of continuity between the ever-changing starting unit. So Joe Douglas said the offensive line would be their top priority, and he wasn't kidding, including Becton. The New York Jets added 5 new offensive linemen, brought back Alex Lewis. New York and their fans are hoping Becton will be protecting Darnold's blind side well into the next decade. Round 2, pick 59, they got Denzel Mims, wide receiver from Baylor. So they traded out of pick 48 with a bunch of playmakers on the board, causing fans to hold their breath. However, then the pick was announced. Jets Nation let out a sigh of relief, followed by hysterical laughing. The New York Jets traded down 11 spots and still landed a potential number 1 receiver in Denzel Mims, while also picking up an extra third-round pick. There's tremendous value, as numerous draft experts had Mims going in the back end of the first round. When the Jets made the call to Mims, his response was less excited and more of anger. He wasn't angry that he was about to be a New York Jet, but because of how many teams pass him over. He'll bring that anger and chip on his shoulder when he suits up every Sunday for the New York Jets. Mims is a player that wants ball in crunch time and big moments, so New York may have gotten a big-time steal in the second round. One season why Mims endured a mini slide could be that he had some drop issues in his junior season. However, it was noted that he actually played the 2018 season with a broken hand, which is kind of hard to play wide receiver with a broken hand. When comparing his 2018 numbers to his past season, Mims improved in every statistic. In 2018, he finished with 55 catches for 794 yards and 8 touchdowns. This past season, his numbers went up. He totaled 66 catches for 1,020 yards and 12 touchdowns. So the broken hand truly affected his gameplay there. And as for now, he'll help the New York Jets. Mims is a big physical receiver that go up and snatch the football out of the air. Next up, round 3, pick 68, Ashton Davis, defensive back from California. Probably the biggest head scratcher for the Jets here, but when the Jets selected Ashton Davis, it left a lot of fans perplexed. Jets need help in the secondary, but there were bigger needs elsewhere that could have been filled here. However, with that being said, he's not a bad prospect. New York won't have to force Davis into a specific role, and he'll gladly play wherever Coach Williams wants him. He has great speed, being a former track star in hurdles, and he will bring the big hits. He was a walk-on at Cal, where he basically forced the coaching staff to give him a spot. He's a leader and team captain, which was apparently the theme on day 3 of the 2020 draft for the Jets. In 2019, Davis had 2 interceptions with 4 passes defended and 55 total tackles. He should be able to contribute right away on special teams and coverages and as a returner. This selection may have been a shock, but Douglas said they will stick to their board and take the best football players that they possibly can, and he stayed true to that. Davis was ranked like 52, came off the board in the third round at 68. That is a fantastic value for the Jets when your roster is talent deprived. Sometimes it's worth going for the best player available over need, which is why the selection is pretty high grade for most people. Round 3, pick 79, Jabari Zuniga, defensive end, Florida. So pass rusher was a big need for the Jets here. They had a nice potential with Jabari here. They also needed to get more athletic up front and off the edge. There will be some mixed reports on Jabari, whether or not he can be an effective pass rusher, but with his power and athleticism, don't see why he can't develop into a consistent pass rusher. If you turn on the tape, Zuniga gets into the backfield a ton, stuffing runners as well as quarterbacks behind the line. He showed some real promise in the 2019 season before suffering a high ankle sprain. He finished with 3 sacks and 12 total tackles in just 5 games played. However, in 12 games in 2018, he totaled 6.5 sacks and 45 tackles, including 11.5 for loss. So he has a twitch, which was echoed by Booger McFarland on ESPN. He's fast off the ball and can win with his first step. He'll need to develop into more of a pass rusher before we see respectable numbers. He could be very well-rounded defender early on. He understands his assignments and will do his job. Due to addressing a team need, this will get a good grade. So on to round 4. They had 3 picks in round 4, I believe. So LaMichael Perrine, running back from Florida. New York Jets were rumored to be looking for their running back of the future, and they may have found him in this draft. Bunch of valuations saying Perrine doesn't do any one thing at high level, but he does everything fairly well. Not sure how that is a knock on a player, but to me, it just shows how much of a well-rounded player he truly is. So he possesses the breakaway speed that the Jets have been desperately missing. He has great vision and balance to succeed at the next level as well. He could be a great complement to Bell for the 2020 season as well. Perrine has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He had 40 receptions for Florida in 2019. So, then James Morgan, quarterback from Florida International. This is the biggest shock of the Jets draft, in my opinion. They drafted a random quarterback. Nobody's really familiar with James Morgan, but he's a gunslinger. He grew up in Green Bay, was a huge Brett Favre fan, so it makes sense that he adopted Brett Favre's play style. Joe Douglas knows how important backup quarterbacks are in the NFL, as he won 2 of his 3 Super Bowl rings with a backup signal caller. Also, if you watch those 3 games without Darnold, you would know that the Jets need to find a competent backup quarterback. So it might have been a great decision. I think it might have been a little too early for that one, though. Then you have Cameron Clark, O-line from Charlotte. So when Douglas told Darnold's parent 11 months ago that he would do everything in his power to protect their son, he was not joking. Cameron Clark marks the 6th new addition to the offensive line and 2nd in the 2020 NFL Draft. Again, not completely familiar with Clark. Haven't watched much of his tape, but when talking to some people that are familiar with his game, he's a guy that can play both guard or tackle in the NFL, which is the exact versatility that Douglas looks for his offensive linemen. Clark also mentioned that he worked out with the Jets' first-round Mekhi Becton in the past and could now potentially line up next to each other with Clark at left guard and Becton at left tackle. In round 5, they got Bryce Hall, cornerback from Virginia. They got a steal here. Bryce Hall dropped all the way to the 5th round and was right there for the Jets. Hall had some lower leg injuries at Virginia, but he was still expected to go on day 2 of the draft. However, he fell farther than originally thought. He's a big physical cornerback at 6'1", over 200 pounds. He has nice footwork and long arms that allow him to be in a position to break up passes. Then you have Brandon Mann, punter from Texas A&M. And let me tell you guys, this guy has a freaking leg. I've seen it firsthand. Oh my God. He punts it like 70 yards every time. It's insane. He is the best punter I've ever seen. And I'm not even joking. He is the best punter I've ever seen. I've seen him in person. He is the best punter I've ever seen. Just saying. Great pick. Like, I know it's just a punter. Great pick, though. He is the best punter I have ever seen live. So, overall, great for the Jets. I think they did a pretty good job. They filled some holes. With the exception of the FIU quarterback, James Morgan, they pretty much filled everything they needed to fill. But once again, I mean, there's some logic to the backup quarterback. Once again, I think it was probably a little too early to get a backup quarterback. But that's it for this episode, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and I'll talk to y'all later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.